It looks like the Packers have once again hit on quarterback as Jordan Love had a fabulous 2023 season. What does that mean for 2024? Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crackalacking? It's your boy Broshmo. Just in case you did not know, so we're back again with the deep dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and I project how they'll do in 2024. Today, I got your Green Bay Packers, so get the cheeseheads on nice and tight and strap up for the ride as we're going to first go over their 2023 before we look to the future. Jordan Love got his first start as a full-time starter and things looked pretty good with the win versus the Chicago Bears 38-20. Unfortunately, Love would be without receiver Christian Watson and running back Aaron Jones in the loss to the Falcons. His performance was here and there and more of what people expected in his first year as a starter. Love would bounce back after that loss with a very impressive come-from-behind victory against the New Orleans Saints in Week 3. However, the Packers would go on a 4-game losing streak where the inexperience was on full display. Losing veterans like David Bakhtiari, Devondre Campbell, and Jair Alexander just hurt this team big time. And during this stretch, they would also go on and trade veteran cornerback Rasul Douglas before the trade deadline. At this point, no one would be surprised if the Packers season went down the drain. But then you suddenly had young players stepping up like Jaden Reed, Datavion Wicks, Tucker Kraft, Rasheed Walker, Carl Brooks, Carrington Valentine. And then the Packers got wins over the Lions and the Chiefs behind their youth and the arm of Jordan Love. This team was competing and they managed to sneak into the playoffs at 9-8. But then they would have to travel to AT&T Stadium to take on the 2-seed Dallas Cowboys in the wildcard round. And they proceeded to have no problem. They were up 27-7 at halftime and ran away with the victory 38-32. Next, they would head to Santa Clara to take on the 49ers in the divisional round. They would fall short 24-21 after missing a field goal and a Jordan Love interception on their final 2 drives. In terms of efficiency, the Packers weren't anything special, but Matt LaFleur's play calling and Jordan Love's development made for a team that could go point for point with any team in the league. They were 5th in passing offense EPA and 12th in points scored. Now, the real question when it comes to the Packers is if Jordan Love is legit. They already paid him like he is, but will he be? Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first-time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The Packers moved Rasul Douglas at the trade deadline and he was probably their best player to leave, though you could make a good argument for running back Aaron Jones, though his health was up and down the last few seasons. They also saw guys like David Bakhtiari, who's been a great Packer, but also been pretty banged up the last couple of years. He's gone. You have guard John Runyon, linebacker Devondre Campbell, even safety Darnell Savage. All those guys ended up walking, but the Packers got replacements for those guys this offseason, whether it was via free agency or the draft. So let's go ahead and talk about those additions. So the Packers made 2 major moves via free agency, along with a minor move that's more of a depth option. But let's go over those, with the first one being Josh Jacobs. They gave him 4 years, $48 million. Didn't like the contract initially because I don't like when you pay running backs big money. I just don't. However, all the guarantees are in the first year of the deal. And after that, they could honestly cut him loose. After that, it's just like one-year options for the Packers. So it actually ends up being a really good contract, and you get younger at the running back position with Aaron Jones being 29, Josh Jacobs 26. However, those were 2 guys that struggled with injury last year. You had Aaron Jones in the hamstring, Josh Jacobs, the quad injury kept him out of the last 4 games. So You're hoping he could stay healthy. I'm hoping the Packers can tap into his ability as a pass catcher. I don't think the Raiders really did a good job of that over like the 5-year span that they had Jacobs. Maybe like 2 of those years, he was really a vital part of the receiving game, but it was just too often on. I'm hoping the Packers can really take advantage of that, but they haven't really strapped themselves to Jacobs for the long term. And I actually like that even more. And we'll talk about it later in the draft. They go out to get not just younger, but also cheaper at the position, hoping to hit on a guy. And I don't think that, I honestly think they'll probably be in the running back market again when the 2025 draft comes along, because that's going to be a very gifted running back class. So if they don't want to stick with Josh Jacobs' contract, they don't necessarily have to. So it actually ends up being a good deal and a good addition. And that's not to talk down Josh Jacobs. It's just kind of where running back value is. Like, Josh Jacobs, really darn good, though last season the forced missed tackles weren't necessarily there for him. The yards after contact were, I think, the lowest of his career last season. Just wasn't an ideal year for Josh Jacobs. And then the other addition, the other big addition, probably their biggest, is Xavier McKinney, who's coming off a banger year with the Giants, probably his best in the season. He's starting to, I think he should at least be in that discussion when we talk about like the top 5, top 7 safeties in the NFL. This is someone with just very good versatility, can play in the slot, play in the box, and play deep. But he is just such a phenomenal tackler. Like last season, he had a missed tackle rate of 5.7%. That's exceptionally low. He was active in the run game with 26 defensive stops. Those are essentially just stops that result in either no gain or a negative gain. But he was also an active participant in coverage with 3 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. And safety was probably by far the weakest position for the Packers last season. They move on from Darnell Savage. Rudy Ford they end up not bringing him back. And so they needed to address safety. I thought the free agent safety market was pretty solid, and they probably spent the most of any team out there on a safety. But you're getting one of, like, at the very least, one of the top 7 players at the position there. And again, they didn't stop here. They would go on to go look to get younger at the position via the draft. We'll get to their draft picks in a minute. And really the only other sign-in that is really notable, like they had a ton of re-sign-ins. They bring in Greg Joseph at kicker. He's gonna battle Anders Carlson, who was a bit up and down last season. But the addition I want to talk about is, where are you at, Andre Dillard? You are somewhere over here. There he is, Andre Dillard. I like this pickup. He hasn't looked great as a starter during his career. It's just facts. And he's not going to be asked to be a starter here. He's going to come in, and whether he plays guard or tackle, he's going to be a very good depth piece. And I think he is very good for this scheme. Like, he is a good mover. And that's going to work well in a Matt LaFleur's system where it's very wide zone. So I really like that addition as, again, just as a depth piece. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about what they did via the draft. So with the 25th overall pick, the Packers took Jordan Morgan, tackle, out of Arizona. And for the longest time, because I kept saying offensive line makes too much sense for the Packers. Just the depth is so good in the first round this past draft season. And so many times did I see Packers fans just like, oh, they don't take offensive line early. They don't. They just don't do that. It's unbelievable. I don't believe it'll happen. I mean, never say never, guys. Like, legitimately, never say never when it comes to the draft. Oh, this team, the Eagles, they haven't spent a first round pick on corner in like 20 years. And then this year they take Quinion Mitchell because it makes sense. Listen, typically, again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but typically teams take what they need. They just do. Now, hopefully your teams aren't reaching on prospects just to address a need. It's how you get in trouble, like with the Raiders of past, like Alex Leatherwood and such. But you look at the value on the board and you decide, okay, let's trade back, or maybe we pass up on this need for now just because the value is not right, and just go in another direction and draft a player worthy of this draft position. Like that's honestly how most teams look at the draft. So like, again, I see it every draft season, every draft cycle, every time I put out a mock draft. This team would never blah blah blah. Heard that during the whole Chicago Bears thing and Caleb Williams thing. People are funny. Just open up your mind. Things can happen. There's my rant for the day. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But let's get into Jordan Morgan, who looks like he's going to be playing guard for them. He's a smooth mover, and he's got some legit power to him. It's just, how can he turn that into functional play strength? Because one of my gripes with him was, especially on the outside when he goes to engage in pass pro, he likes to like swing his arms back and then like kind of like gear it up, reel up, and let go. And it's just like, no, just fire him off right from the get-go, because a lot of times that just results you being late to the point of contact and just late to engagement. You're kind of giving the defender, because you're already starting off the back foot, you're giving the defender more, just more than you should. So that, again, a little nitpick, but the dude's movement skills are wonderful. He is perfect, I think, for this scheme, whether it is at tackle, whether it's at guard. Some people kind of didn't like the arm length. I think he ended up coming in at sub 33 inches. Let me just verify. It's been so long, I think I forgot. Did I move him to guard? No, I didn't. Okay. Yeah, so he ends up coming in with 32 and 7/8 inches. But we've seen tackles get by on suboptimal arm length because of how good of athletes they are. We're talking like Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater. And it could be the same here for a Jordan Morgan. But right now, the Packers are in a really good spot at their tackle position. They'll get a full year to see what Rasheed Walker really is. And you could play Morgan there at guard. You just lost John Runyon. So like, this pick made all the sense in the world, whether it was like, he is a guard, oh, maybe he's a future tackle for us. He is a versatile offensive lineman. That's perfect. Let's go ahead and move to the second round. With their second pick, they take Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. He ended up being my top linebacker in the class. Just great athlete, good length, really good just blitz and upside pass rush ability. It's probably how he's going to be utilized, as we'll talk about it with the new DC, what this defense could look like, because there are going to be some vast changes compared to what we've seen the last few seasons with the Packers defensively. But he's a good fit just because that pass rush and upside, you could develop him in terms of what he could be in coverage. He was used very simplistically, like, hey, here's your hook zone, or hey, you're going to be covering the flats. It wasn't anything too crazy. To be fair, he was essentially protected in coverage, but you can still do that early on in his career, because it sounds like it's going to be a competition for him to get that other linebacking spot next to Quay Walker, with him and Isaiah McDuffie, which McDuffie, more of this like thumper type. That's going to be a really good run defender, but just doesn't have the upside as a pass rusher. And I think that's going to be important. So if anything, Cooper is going to be utilized early when it comes to when they're trying to bring pressure, and maybe he won't be on the field for like early downs, and maybe that'll be more of a McDuffie role. But that was a good pickup. Again, he was my top linebacker in this class. With their other second round pick, they take Javon Bullard, and I love that. You're going to be matching him up with Xavier McKinney. Butler could either play in the slot, he could play deep, he could play in the box. He's just very versatile in that manner. Last year was his first year playing more of a traditional safety role. Prior to that, he was playing a lot in the slot. The dude's just a very fluid mover, and he's got some legit closing speed. Like, this was I thought it was a really good pickup here to really revamp that safety position. That, again, you kind of had this, I want to say mass exodus, but it was more like, we're letting these guys go. And then in the third round, they grab Marshawn Lloyd. We'll say this, not the biggest Marshawn Lloyd guy. I wasn't. And it wasn't because of what he is as an athlete, because he's phenomenal. The build is great. Coming in at 5'9", 221 pounds. Very, very smooth athlete, very quick athlete, light feet, can put you in a blender with the ball in his hands. My problems lied with drops, fumbles, pass pro. I didn't think he was particularly great in pass protection. More so just a body at best. The drops, it's like, come on, man. Like, you have all this potential. If we put you out in space, we just need you to catch the football. And then fumbles, man. He had 3 fumbles last season. I don't love that. So that's why I was a little bit lower on him than some other guys like your Jalen Wright, your Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson. Even I was a big Tyrone Tracy guy. Ray Davis I even had ahead of him. Those guys I just thought did a better job of securing and protecting the football. Not to say that in terms of athleticism and ability and home run threat that they were on par with someone like Lloyd. But you got to get the ball in his hands and make sure it stays in his hands. But those are things that you can easily develop. They really are, that you can easily work on. I know he got banged up in the preseason game here recently. I don't know how severe the knee injury it is. It didn't sound like minor, or it didn't sound major. I'm just going to take a quick look. So it was a hamstring injury that apparently that was hampering him during camp. And then he re-aggravated it in the preseason game, which that you could also mention injuries being a little bit of a red flag with him. I think he had a quad injury back in 2023. He had the ACL injury to start off his career at South Carolina. So just kind of another red flag that why I was a little bit lower on Lloyd, but none of it had to do with his abilities as an athlete. So we'll see. It sounds like he's going to be out for the next week and a half, 2 weeks when it comes to training camp. But hopefully someone you can develop, because I think his role on this offense could be deadly. Like, this is the best scheme. A wide zone scheme was perfect for a guy like Marshawn Lloyd. With their other third round pick, they take Tyron Hopper. That was kind of a whatever pick. I had more of a 6th round grade on him, maybe a 5th. It was a 6th round grade. And just someone who's had like a solid career at Mizzou. He was a second team all SEC last season. But like, just someone who I felt like got washed out of the run game, who just out in space wasn't the most consistent tackler, but he was a smooth athlete. So like, I don't know. I felt like he was like more of a day 3 type of player. You already taking a shot at linebacker. I don't know why they needed to take another one this early, but it is what it is. Good, solid player, but probably no more than a like special teamer in my opinion. And then we get to the 4th round. They take Evan Williams. I thought Evan Williams was going to get drafted just solely based on like how gritty he is, how like his motor, like he probably had one of the best motors in the class, and just what he brings as a special teamer. And yeah, this was earlier than I had him projected. I think he was more 5th or 6th round for me, but like I don't think he's going to be a starter really ever for this squad unless injury happens, but he's going to be a consistent special teamer, and I think he could be a solid backup. So I like, honestly, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at the range. I'm not mad at it. And then they go Jacob Monk out of Duke. I think his best spot in the NFL is at guard, but he played center most recently for Duke. Phenomenal athlete, absolutely flies. Another good fit for a wide zone blocking scheme. I love Monk. I think I was probably higher on him than the general draft community, as I had a 5th round grade on him. They end up taking him in the 5th. I thought it was really solid. And then the Packers, they go back to the safety well once again with Kidden Oladapo. I would have liked this instead of taking Evan Williams, maybe using that pick somewhere else. I think could have been probably more beneficial, but Oladapo, hell of a good player, very much a box safety. He brings that size and physicality. Good pickup here in the 5th. And at this point, they have literally like reshaped their safety room. And then they take Travis Glover in the 6th round, who he's got some potential backup upside at the tackle position. He needs be a bit more polished with his hands, but he's got good size, good length, plays with a good motor, good locker room guy. Like, when he ended up being a late addition to the Senior Bowl, and when he showed up, man, he was I don't want to say a character because it makes it sound like he's wacky and wonky, but like you could tell like the fierceness and the competitive spirit just rose at the Senior Bowl when they were doing their either individual drills or team drills. Like, he brought a presence to him, and I liked that. I liked that quite a bit. And then in the 7th round, they get Michael Pratt. Kind of shocked that he fell this far, but hey, ends up being a really good pickup. Probably high-end backup in the NFL, and that's perfect. That's what the Packers are looking for. He could come out and compete with Sean Clifford, who I was kind of shocked was drafted altogether all of a year ago. But Pratt was a really good pickup, really good value. I had him more as his like 4th, 5th round type of prospect. You get him literally at the back end of the 7th round. Solid pickup. And then the Packers just continue to take good value as they grab Kalen Keene with, I don't believe this is like the 2nd or 3rd to last pick in the draft. Kalen Keene, prior to the season, was viewed as a potential 1st rounder. Just because like it might be a little undersized, but the dude was super gritty. Doesn't mind getting in the faces and getting physical with receivers during the route. He'll mix it up, and in 2022 he was all around the catch point, making plays. And last year was just quite the opposite. Like, I don't think he may have allowed 1 touchdown, but like the ball skills weren't there. The completion rate went way up. It just wasn't nearly as good, and I fully expected him to probably return to school just because it wasn't an ideal year. He decides to come out and just doesn't have a good draft process. Like, wasn't great at the Senior Bowl. I'll say he was probably one of the worst corners there. The combine testing wasn't good. Like, not that we expected him to blow it out of the water, but it was even less than ideal. It was just like everything went wrong for him in the 2023 season, and then in the 2020, or at least the build up to the 2024 draft. Everything went wrong, and he ends up falling this far. But here's like at this juncture in the draft, you're willing to bank on a guy that you saw it from in 2022, and you're hoping maybe you can get him here on the squad, whether it's the practice squad, maybe he makes the final roster. We'll talk about that when we get to the offense and the defense. But that you can develop, and maybe he can be something for your squad someday. I like taking those shots, those roll the dice here late in the draft. Ends up being a really good pickup. And altogether, like, didn't love like all the picks, but for the most part, they made sense. They took value when value was available. Not necessarily true for all their picks, but they had a lot, and I thought they used it relatively well. I thought it was a very fine draft. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this coaching staff, because the defense is going to be interesting this year. The big change on this coaching staff is at DC, as Joe Barry's out. Jeff Hafley is in, and you're going to get a radically different defense, at least in terms of the scheme, as Joe Barry was this 3-4 defense with a lot of too high, a lot of Tampa 2, a lot of quarters coverage, opposed to Hafley, who you're going to be moving to more of a 4-3. You're going to be running press man, cover 3. It's a lot of single high. You're going to get guys in and around the box, in and around the line of scrimmage. That way you don't know exactly where he's going to blitz from. Is it coming from the linebacker, the safety position? Is it the slot? Is it the corner? Where is it coming? I don't know. He likes these exotic blitz packages. And the one thing that translates, defensively at least, when it comes to these collegiate coaches making the step up into the big leagues, is blitz rate. At Boston College, usually he was around a 30 to 33% blitz rate. I don't expect that to change, at least dramatically, in the NFL, though. Hey, he is coming from the college ranks, so it's not going to be like a copy and paste type of defense. Like, he's going to have to tailor fit his scheme to the NFL. So it's going to be a bit more complex. But conceptually, this is probably what it's going to look like. But again, we won't know until we see it. But we've heard some of these things from camp. And let's not act like Hafley doesn't have NFL experience. He's been the head coach for Boston College for like last 4 or 5 years. He was a DC for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But prior to that, he was a defensive backs coach for the Buccaneers, Browns, and 49ers. So he does have a little taste of the NFL. Now let's move to the offense, as the head coach is Matt LaFleur. He's been here since 2019, formerly the OC for the Rams and the Titans. It's a wide zone blocking scheme. They like to use a lot of motion. They like to come out in similar looks, but throw something different at you. That way they can just layer plays effectively. He really likes to utilize the play action, and very similar to Arthur Smith in terms of using the play action to take those deep shots. We saw that to be true with Jordan Love last season. And I think where this offense was most impressive, and it was during the second half of the season, where Jordan Love, his accuracy just freaking took a full notch up. Like he was really started to get really good on the short to intermediate passes. I'm not saying it was perfect, but I'm saying you definitely saw like a good, like that during the course of that season, the development. Now you can't really talk about Matt LaFleur without talking about Adam Stenavich, who has been huge. He has done a great job at developing offensive line talent for the Packers since coming here with LaFleur. Luke Buckus, who's the O-line coach, has had a big hand in that as well, as he's now the offensive line coach since Stenavich a couple of years ago, getting promoted from run game coordinator and offensive line coach to OC. But they've done a great job, whether it's guys like Rasheed Walker last season, Zach Tom. We've seen it with like John Runyon, who ended up getting paid this offseason. They've done a great job at developing offensive line talent, and he deserves a ton of credit. But let's talk about some of the other coaches on this coaching staff. As I was just talking about Luke Buckus. If you didn't know, he's the nephew of Dit Buckus. So yeah, isn't that kind of cool? Tom Clements, shout out here. This guy did a great job developing Jordan Love. He's been around the NFL for a hell of a long time. He's a former CFL quarterback, which is kind of wild. I think he was in the CFL for like 12 years. But he's done a really good job. He's the quarterbacks coach for the Packers. You also have Sean Mannion, who is in his first year as a NFL coach. Like he was just last year, he was on the practice squad for like, I think like the Vikings and the like Seahawks or something. Now he starts his coaching journey. So I'm kind of excited to see that and just kind of follow that as we go. You also got Jason Vrabel here as the passing game coordinator. I think he's been in that role for at least the last year or two.
Not related to Mike Vrabel. They spell their last names differently, but he's been around here since I think LaFleur was hired. He was formerly a running backs coach and a wide receivers coach. So just a kind of a veteran coach here on the staff. Moved to the defensive coaches. You got Derek Ainsley, who is looking to rub that Brandon Staley stink off of him. He was the DC for the Chargers during Staley's tenure there. So let's not act like he's a bad coach because of that. Prior to that, he had success with the Raiders. He was a defensive backs coach for Alabama back in like 2016. So yeah, again, I feel like he's just trying to get that Brandon Staley stink off of him. Anthony Campanile, this dude's been the linebackers coach for the Dolphins for like the last 3 or 4 years, and he's done a great job. He's here as the run game coordinator and linebackers coach, which is great. He's going to be coaching a very young linebacking core, and I mean, even in some regard, he helps with the pass rush as well, as he's been able to develop guys like Jalen Phillips and even Chubb having the big year last year before injury. I'm a Dolphins fan, so it just hurts to bring it up. But he's a good coach, man. He's a good coach, and it's cool to see him over here. Who else we got here? Any other names I recognize? Of course, you got Rich Bisaccia, who everyone remembers him as the initial Raiders interim head coach that felt like he should have got the job there. Ended up not. He's been the special teams coordinator here since, along with being the assistant head coach. He's just a guy that's loved by his players, and he just does a really good job also coaching up the special teams. Kyle Wilbur, former player, was in the league for like 10 years mainly as a special teamer. He's the special teams quality control coach. Again, I'm a sucker for former players that are now part of coaching staffs. Well, let's go ahead. Let's talk about the roster. Let's talk about the offense. As per usual, you'll see my grades for each position group over here to my, I don't know, is this the right or left? You let me know. But Jordan freaking Love, we saw him grow right before our very eyes. Like, again, he was a radically different passer at the end of the year than he was at the beginning. You love to see that development over the course of a season. Again, this was his first year as a full-time starter. This was a good appetizer. Now I'm ready for the main course because he's got a lot of talent around him. But where he needs to improve, and I kind of mentioned, it's like you saw him become better on the short to intermediate, but where he really needs to get better is on the intermediate level when it comes to his accuracy on passes of 10 to 19 yards. He had a completion rate, an adjusted completion rate of 58%. And that's just, it needs to get better. It just needs to get better. I mean, before we could talk about him in like as a potentially elite quarterback, like the completion percentage has to be better. The accuracy has to be better. Last year, he was, 73% adjusted completion percentage. You know where the weak spot was. It was on those intermediate routes. Let's work on that. Let's get more accurate because the big time throws are there. Like, he was on par with guys like Matthew Stafford and Dak. The difference is those guys' adjusted completion percentage, their throw to throw accuracy is around that 78%. So it's not to say Jordan Love is far off, because that's not the truth. But now in his second year as a full-time starter, can he become more accurate? Because remember when he was coming out of the draft out of Utah State, accuracy, decision-making were kind of the big things. I thought the decision-making last year was, especially in the second half of the season, was pretty darn good. They add a Josh Jacobs here at running back. We talked about that a little bit. I think if you're the Packers, you're hoping you could rekindle that 2022 season where he was just uber productive. I want to see them utilize him in the passing game, and you're kind of hoping for 2022 Josh Jacobs and not what you saw last season, where he just wasn't as, I don't want to say elusive, but just wasn't breaking contact as often. Again, if you look at his yards after contact, it was the lowest among his career. So you kind of hope it. And you know what? He should be able to do that because this is a very good offensive line. They bring back 4 starters, and arguably, like, they lose John Runyon, but he was probably like their 4th best offensive lineman. Like, Zach Tom has kind of grown into the best player on this offensive line. He truly, truly has. And he was initially someone who I thought probably should stick at center. And he has done the dang thing at right tackle. Like, props to him. Props to him. You also have Jenkins there at left guard. The still really good pass protector. I know he's got that dog in him as a run blocker. Just last year, it just wasn't quite what we're typically used to. But he's going to be fine. He's, again, their like 2nd best offensive lineman. Means this team is in really good shape. Question is, with Rasheed Walker, is he going to be able to replicate what he did last season? He does need to grow as a run blocker. There's still a lot of undisciplinedness. Is that a word? Am I just making this up? But you could see that there's still a lack of discipline and a lack of polish when it comes to the run game, not necessarily hitting his landmarks or hitting his targets when he's asked to get to the 2nd level. But as a pass protector, he was very impressive. He definitely deserved another go at being the starter here. I do like the addition of Jordan Morgan. But I do like, again, Morgan can function as guard. And if things work out with Walker, that's great. If they don't, then you do have Morgan who could step up and maybe be your left tackle of the future. So it's a nice little fail safe. I already talked about Morgan quite a bit. Josh Myers, are you anything other than just mid? Like, this guy's he is, I think, easily their worst offensive lineman, but it's not like he's terrible. He's not. He's fine. But you gotta hope you can do better than fine. That's why they go after like Jacob Monk, which I'm kind of excited for. There's a sleeper if, Josh Myers is still just hella okay. Because when's his contract come up? I feel like he's in a contract year. Myers contract. Pull it up here. He is in the final year of his deal, and I feel like they probably don't bring him back. So, again, big Jacob Monk fan. Look out for him. We'll talk about the offensive line a little bit more in depth, but in terms of playmakers, they might not have an alpha, but they got a ton of great secondary options. Like, I feel like this team is filled with wide receiver 2s. I truly, truly do. It's kind of nutty. It's kind of insane. Let's start with Romeo Doubs, who's probably one of the better wide receiver 2s in the league. And he kind of functions as the wide receiver 1 for this offense. Just someone who's gotten much better as a route runner, a very crafty vertical threat, and just a solid all-around player. Like, I expect him to kind of have a career year this season. You got Jaden Reed, who is just freaking nifty, dude. Like, you could use him as like this jet sweep motion option. But like, he's got the quick feet. He could dice you up with good route running, but you really like what he can do as a vertical threat. And that's why I love the vertical game from the Packers here. You got an arm that can take advantage of it, and you have playmakers that can take advantage of it down the field. Shoot, including freaking Christian Watson, who hopefully he can stay healthy, but someone who's got that size, that speed combination to just tear it up. But I really had a hard time. Like, I really thought about putting Dontavian Wicks here as the other outside wide receiver. It was just like, you know what? If Watson's healthy, he's the guy. I don't know. We're going to see a healthy dose of a lot of different playmakers in this offense. I'll go a little deeper with the receivers in a second. Let's talk about the tight end tight ends, really. As Luke Musgrave played really well last year, did get banged up, ended up missing like what six or so games. What was the injury specifically? He ended up missing time with a kidney. Oh, something with his kidney. Golly. But he's this like just this seam threat that can just tear you up and be a nightmare. He's got that size and speed. But they also have Tucker Kraft, who stepped in and was hella good. He almost functions as more of a jumbo wide receiver who's got really good hands. How were they last year? Because I know coming out of South Dakota State, there were times, okay, one drop, love to see it. There were times where he just had puzzling drops, like easy catches, and they weren't necessarily focus catches. It was just like, what the hell was that? But for the most part, during his career at South Dakota State, very sure-handed, but you would go back and watch and be like, wait, do you have natural ball skills? But only one drop last year. You love to see it. He's going to function as a tight end too here, but you know this dude's going to see a lot of the field. You really, really do. Let's actually just jump into the remainder of these playmakers because there's a lot of them. There really is. Here we go. As Dontavian Wicks. We haven't talked about him just yet, but he's going to be in this rotation when it comes to the wide receivers. He stepped up huge, ended up having 580 yards last season, 4 tutties. Showed he can be dangerous after the catch. He led all pass catchers in forced missed tackles. Someone who can honestly win at all levels, but maybe not necessarily have that speed to create separation down the field. So more often you're going to be faced with a jump ball scenario, but where he really eats you alive is on the short to intermediate parts of the field. So like the wide receiver room, it's again, you don't have that alpha, but you have so many darn good options. You really, really do. Even like I know Bo Melton's kind of a bit like people are a big fan of Bo Melton here. He's kind of just like this fifth wide receiver. Like initially, I think he was a 7th round draft pick by Seahawks. Ends up eventually getting coming over here, and like I mean, the few cases we've seen him, he's been fairly solid. Like let's not act like he didn't do nothing last year. He had over 200 yards and a tutty. You also have Malik Heath, who I actually really liked out of Ole Miss. He had 125 yards and a tutty. So they're probably going to keep 6 wide receivers. You could make a great case for Samori Toure, who's a bit of a fan favorite. He even had some production last season for this squad. So like who's gonna be the practice squad receiver? Who? But I can definitely tell you got Watson, you got Dobbs, you got Reed, you got Wicks. You're going to see a healthy dose of all 4 of those guys. Grant DuBose, he's kind of a bigger vertical option, a little speed to him. What was it? Was it just last year? No, I guess it was just last year. Coming out of Charlotte. Not really familiar with like Julian Hicks or Dimitri Stanley, so I couldn't really tell you much about them. They're probably just practice squad or training camp bodies. Same with Jalen Wayne. But really the guys to talk about, again, are Wicks, Watson, Reed, Dobbs, with Heath and Melton being those next guys up. At tight end, the other cats on the roster here, you got Ben Simmons, Tyler Davis, Joel Wilson, Messiah Swinson. Guys I'm largely unfamiliar with. Tyler Davis, I feel like I want to say Clemson. That doesn't sound right. Georgia Tech, that's right. Just largely unfamiliar with these guys, so couldn't really tell you much about them. Kraft, Musgrave, those are the dudes. They are the dudes. Kraft, I think, is a better probably blocking option than Musgrave. Musgrave, you go back to like Oregon State, it was more Quinterio, or is that how you say it? Regardless, the other Oregon State tight end that was more of the blocker, while Musgrave kind of functioned as the tight end to jumbo slot player. So it's like Tucker Kraft there. I think Tucker Kraft's definitely got a more all-around game, while Musgrave is more of this like potential big play threat at tight end. Along the offensive line, I talked about Andre Dillard. That's a solid addition, even if it's just as a backup. Kadeem Telefort, I believe that was from UAB, someone who had some interesting physical tools. Yep, UAB, interesting physical tools, but someone for the most part is a maybe potentially could be a high-end backup, but you're still developing him. The other options at tackle, Travis Glover, who's probably more of a practice squad body. Luke Tenuta was coming out of Virginia Tech a year or so ago. Taller tackle who struggles with leverage, but solid enough movement skills. But he's probably a long shot to make the roster. Couldn't tell you much about Caleb Jones. You go to the interior here. I was a big Sean Ryan fan coming out of UCLA. I thought he gives you that tackle guard versatility, but I think I forgot, like right off the bat, he was like suspended for like PEDs or something, and just hasn't really been able to get his foot in. I was looking at some of the training camp reports, and he ended up getting after a false start. They were like, "Oh, go play center for the second team." And I was like, "Oh, woof." He's probably on the way out at some point. Donovan Jennings was someone I liked out of South Florida. Another toolsy guy, toolsy-ish, brings the length, but more of a developmental player. Lacetius Smith, I liked him coming out of Virginia Tech. I think it's interesting they list him here as a center, but he's probably going to be just more of an interior player. If he makes the roster, he's just if we get injuries, you're the backup to the backup, because Royce Newman, he's they're more veteran bodies, so that's probably the first guy in if injury hits. It really depends, because I mean, if it's like a Rasheed Walker that goes down or a Zach Tom, you probably kick Jordan Morgan out, and then Newman comes at one of the guard, or like he'll come in at one of the guard spots. I think it'll probably look like that. If it's like a Josh Myers, I am kind of curious. Will that be Monk or will it be Sean Ryan? I think that's actually a little fascinating. When it comes to the backups at running back, they still list AJ Dillon as the backup here. He doesn't offer much. I get it, Quadzilla, but even as like this bruiser, he really just hasn't done much of anything the last couple of years for the Packers. Just not a guy that, like, he can create missed tackles, more so as like just like with his contact balance, he's tough to bring down, but he just doesn't offer a lot of yards after that initial contact. So he is someone you're trying to edge, like kind of like fade out of the offense. And Marshawn Lloyd, I felt like would have been that cat that could go hand in hand with Josh Jacobs, where it's like you could take advantage of Lloyd's speed on more of the wide zone runs, and when you come in for whether it's like inside zone, counter, duos, stuff like that, you could use Jacobs as a bit of the bruiser. Now with Lloyd and the hamstring injury, those can be a bit nagging. So I don't know how much a piece of this backfield he's actually going to get. Emmanuel Wilson actually was an interesting, he's an interesting player, right? Because like he's got good size at six, like great size at 6'1", 226, and he didn't necessarily get the start, but he had a couple of good games there. At what was it? It was like somewhere in the middle of the season, where he like broke off a couple of long runs. I think he's fascinating. If anything, I would like to see Emmanuel Wilson kind of take that AJ Dillon role away. Like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just quitting on Dillon too early. Maybe that's more on me. But regardless, I think Wilson is the last player in this backfield. I think he is a good part of the rotation, but you were kind of hoping Lloyd to be that receiving option. I don't think the outside, Jacobs definitely can be utilized in that. Don't get it twisted. but I felt like Lloyd was probably going to be the receiving option. But like, again, I mean, you could use Jacobs in that regard. Looking at the other depth, what is this? Elias Merriweather, was he Iowa? I don't know. It's kind of a big nothing at this point, more of a camp body. No, it was UMass. Maybe it was Iowa at one point. He was probably a transfer. Jarvion Howard, I believe this is the Villanova back. Not a speedster by any means. No, Alcorn State. My bad. Got my small school running backs mixed up. But coming in at 5'10", 215. Yeah, I was thinking of Jalen Jackson from Villanova. So when it comes to Jarvion Howard, someone who's got really like decent speed at like he ran a 4.52. He had a very impressive bench press at stinking 28 reps. That's just nuts. But he also brings really good explosiveness. Not the most shifty guy, more of a, if I see daylight, I'm gonna hit it. I'm gonna hit the hole, and I'm gonna rip off a chunk of yards. He doesn't really like. He runs like the basic running back route tree. Doesn't really offer much as a pass protector. So a lot of what he does is just what he can do as a ball carrier. But I feel like they got guys like Dylan and Wilson that already have that role. So it's like, I don't know. If you're going to stick to roster, you got to bring a little bit more to the table. You got the Clifford Pratt matchup. Who's going to be the backup quarterback? I think Pratt's probably the more long-term option. Still blows my mind that Sean Clifford was a higher round draft pick than Michael Pratt. Because I didn't see that. But let's go ahead. Let's move to the defense. Do love this offense. I got them highly graded, as you can tell. I got them with an overall of an A-, so they're in that like top 10 tier. But let's talk about the defense. Now, when it comes to this defense, I think they're going to take their bumps and lumps, but they also have some young talent who are just going to build upon that experience that they gained last season. But keep in mind, this was a team that also was, well, relatively unhealthy at portions. At least the defense was, as Rashawn Gary was coming back from the ACL. So he was kind of a slow burn as they brought him back into the rotation. Yeah, Jair Alexander missed some time with the back and shoulder injury, and then the suspension for this little wacky coin flip thing. You had Eric Stokes being hampered by the foot and the hamstring. Quay Walker had the groin. Still ended up having the most snaps of anyone on the defense last season. But, I mean, for the most part, like this secondary, like I have faith. Let's start with the secondary. Jair Alexander, still hella good. But it's not quite what we're accustomed to over the course of his career. Like I don't think he's a top 10 corner in the league any longer. And that feels kind of funky to say. And I mean, I still think he's definitely in like the upper half of like starting corners in the NFL. It's just, we haven't seen that dominance from him since like the 2020 season. Granted, 2021, he was banged up, but like, so there's a little questions. Can he get back to the type of playmaker he was back in 2022? He had like 5 interceptions. Can he get back to that? You got Eric Stokes. Is this guy ever going to be healthy? Is he ever going to be healthy? We know the talent's there with him, but can he get healthy? I mean, they saw promising things from Carrington Valentine last season, but still, like, he's going to be a second-year player. He was a 7th-round pick. Like, you can't just put all your eggs in one basket with that. You got Keyshawn Nixon, who mainly functioned as the slot corner last season. Also, obviously being a very important return man, but let's not act like he was one of the best slot corners in the NFL. Like, his run defense was mid at best. He He allowed a completion rate about 80%, which even for the slot corner position, that's hella high. So like the cornerback room's got some questions. The safety room, like Xavier McKinney, he's great and all, but then you got like a ton of rookies back there in Javon Bullard and Evan Williams, Anthony Johnson Jr. I mean, how many snaps did he play last season? Like, I don't really think he got many snaps till like the back half of the year. Yeah, he ended up playing like 300 snaps. So like, I mean, you also got Kitten Oladapo. Like the secondary in general is relatively, there's question marks, and then you go to the safety and it's unproven. So I think it's fair to kind of reel back your expectations for the defense, where I have them just pretty low when it comes to the defense. And you're changing scheme, though I think that's going to be beneficial for someone like Eric Stokes. I think he fits better in this type of system, but can he stay healthy? So I think those are fair criticisms and critiques. Let's look at the rest of the depth there in the secondary. They got Robert Roche, who's been just this developmental guy who's jumped between a couple of teams. I think he was drafted by the Rams. He spent time with Carolina, but like someone who, from like a speed and size perspective, like he's got tools, but can you rein in and develop those tools? G-Man Green, or I think it's G-Man Green, but former Michigan corner, like he's fine. That's about it. You got Corey Ballantyne, who's just kind of his journeyman, but solid depth player. Kalen Keene, coming off essentially a year that ruined his draft stock. I liked Benny Sapp as like a potential like backup special teams player in the league, but I mean, there's just too much depth there at safety. Like, I doubt he makes the squad. Probably more of a practice squad buy. But like, there's questions. Is it fair to say that there's questions? But I will say the front seven. Ooh, there's a lot more on the bone there. There's a lot more on the bone. When it comes to the linebacker position, obviously you got Quay Walker, who's starting to develop into a very, very good linebacker. However, he's kind of become one of the poster childs of why you don't draft linebacker in the first round. Unfortunately, like he's not like a top player at that position, but he plays with. He's a big time competitor. Plays with a good motor. Plays with good ferociousness. Sometimes the aggression gets the best of him, but he's a good player there. He's a good player. I'm gonna go ahead and say Edgerrin Cooper. Edgerrin Cooper ends up getting more snaps than Isaiah McDuffie. McDuffie though was pretty darn solid for the squad last season. He's shown to be a really reliable early down linebacker. So their snaps are probably going to be very split, but I'm going to lean towards the rookie just a little bit more in this regard. But past that, like, what does this team have at linebacker? You got like an Eric Wilson, who at this point he's just a depth player for the squad. They drafted Tyron Hopper. I thought he got overdrafted. I'm not familiar with some of the other guys here, like Christian Welch. You got Christian Young. Aaron Mosby, I think he was formerly a like kind of this edge off-ball linebacker hybrid coming out of like Fresno State. But like that's a camp body if I've ever seen one. So it's like, okay, not a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to what they have there at linebacker. But when it comes to this defensive line, there is a lot to talk about. I know people are going to talk about, oh, you got Devontae Wyatt as a starter. And when I say starters, I'm talking about guys who are going to see the field the most, and not necessarily guys that are going to start the game, because a lot of people are going to want to pencil in TJ Slayton, which, I mean, that's Slayton's role, man. He's going to be an early down run stuffer, a guy that just takes up a lot of space, a lot of room. And then you're going to bring in guys like Devontae Wyatt and Carl Brooks on more of these passing situations and third downs and whatnot, and have them go and get after it. So like their snap totals are probably going to be relatively in the same ballpark of one another. So let's just not overthink it. You got Kenny Clark next to whoever might be those lead snap getters there. But Kenny Clark has been this can opener for this defense. Like, he eats up a lot of double teams and still able to be productive. But like, I mean be very productive. 61 pressures, 9 sacks. That's via PFF. But he does a great job of just opening up the possibility and opportunity for other players like your Devontae Wyatts and your Carl Brooks. I mean, Wyatt last season via PFF had 45 pressures, 7 sacks. Carl Brooks, he had 25 pressures, 4 sacks. Those guys were uber productive. And then, of course, on the outside, Rashawn Gary, now fully back from the ACL injury. Preston Smith has just been a consistently very good high-end edge 2 in the league. You're going to see a bit more of Lucas Van Ness this season. Kingsley Enagbare, you're hoping he could come back from the ACL injury on top of he's kind of like struggled with lingering hamstring issues, which unfortunately that's just kind of the case with hamstring injuries. But there's a lot of guys on the interior or on this defensive line in general. Like Kingsley Enagbare was been very solid in a rotation role. And just being able to be someone that just isn't only good at stopping the run, but able to get pressure when necessary. Lucas Van Ness, you're hoping that your first rounder just from a year ago, can just elevate himself into that guy to play next to Rashawn Gary. He was someone that came out that you knew was a little underdeveloped, but the tools were immense with him, and you're hoping to see a little bit more from him this season. So like already, we're talking defensive line is like 8 guys deep, and that's just nuts. That's just ludicrous. And then you go deeper, and you got guys like Colby Wooden, who is a bit of a tweener, but someone that could definitely get the job done in a rotation role. Brendan Cox, who was once a highly sought-out recruit that I really liked. I mean, I made a shirt for him. It's still in my merch shop, the whole I Love Cox shirt. You have Jonathan Ford out of Miami, formerly a 7th round draft pick in the 2022 draft. This just big space eater at 340 pounds. You got Keyshawn Banks, former running mate of Cameron Thomas back at San Diego State. So they got some good camp bodies there too. But like this defensive line is just so deep. The question is, will some of these younger guys now take the next step, like your Carl Brooks, your Devontae Wyatts, your Lucas Van Ness? Will those guys take the next step and help your stars in Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark? So like this defense, there's a lot of questions when it comes to the youth. Will they take the next step? Some of these guys coming off injury, and now the change of just the scheme in general. So I think it's fair to be a bit mid when it comes to the Packers defense. But let's go ahead. Let's project how this team does in 2024. So the Packers did have one of the easier schedules in the league last year, as they were 7th. And that does get a little bit harder this season, as in terms of their strength of schedule, I have it ranked 17th. So let's go ahead with the game by game and project the potential ceiling of the Packers as they open the year in Philly, taking on the Eagles. I think it's fair if they drop this game. Typically week 1, I give in a matchup, I would say this close, I typically give it to the home team being the Eagles. But they take on the Colts in Lambeau. I think that could be a victory. As a matter of fact, I think they probably go on a 3-game winning streak where they take on the Titans, they take on the new look Minnesota Vikings. So now we're looking at them 3-1, head into SoFi, take on the Rams. I think it's fair if they drop this game, because now they're going to get back-to-back home games against the Cardinals, against the Texans. I think they could beat the Jags, which was their next game there in week 8. And then prior to their bye, they will take on the Lions. They did split with the Lions last year, so I'll just give them the home game here, but I will have them split. And so when the Detroit game comes up, I'm going to give it to the Lions. They come out of their bye, and they will be taking on the Chicago Bears. Listen, I think there's a lot of promise with the Chicago Bears, but I think as it stands right now, the Packers are still the Bears' daddy. That might change in 2025, but I think it'll be much of the same. They will get a rematch of the divisional round, taking on the 49ers. That's honestly, I think, a losable game. I think, honestly, this little run here where they take on the Niners, the Dolphins, the Lions, even the Bears coming out of their bye. That might be their like toughest stretch of the year. So I think it's fair to say they probably come out 2-2 between that. So I'm going to give them a win over the Dolphins. Again, already gave them their win over the Lions. So I'm going to give the Lions this win. I think they're a better team than Seattle and New Orleans. I think there's probably a good case that they sweep the Vikings this season. And again, we're projecting the ceiling, so let's have them sweeping the Bears, and that would put them at 13 wins. And I don't think that's far off, man. It's hard to win 13 games in the NFL. And you might be excited to hear that I don't have them winning 13, but my projection has them going 12-5. So a big improvement, a 3-game improvement over last season. I do think we're going to see that growth from Jordan Love. Even if we have questions about the defense, this offense showed that they could go point for point, score for score with any team in the league last season. So I think we will see a significant jump in the development of Jordan Love. I think we're going to see a little bit more balance with this team offensively, and I think the defense will get better and better as the season goes on and as those youngsters get more experience, especially if this team can stay healthy. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you want to check out some of my other deep dive videos, for instance, the Bears, I got that one right here, or you can check out my summer deep dive series into the 2025 NFL draft class. I'll leave that one over here as well. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.